I'd given everything to Crimson and Veil, my wife's family business. For years, long nights hunched over spreadsheets, endless meetings with suppliers, and every ounce of effort I could muster to make it grow. It wasn't just a job to me. It was a promise I'd made to Clarissa when we got married, a way to prove I belonged in her world. So when she and her sister Bianca called me into the boardroom that morning, I figured it was about the new expansion plans I'd been working on. I walked in with a stack of papers, ready to talk numbers, but the air felt wrong. Clarissa sat there, arms crossed, her face blank like she barely knew me. Bianca leaned back in her chair, smirking like she'd just won something. "Julian," Bianca started, her voice sharp and cold. "We're letting you go. We don't need lazy people dragging us down." Lazy? The word hit me like a slap. I'd been up until 2 a.m. the night before fixing a deal they'd almost botched. I glanced at Clarissa, waiting for her to say something, anything, to defend me. She didn't. She just stared at the table, her fingers tapping lightly, like this was nothing to her. My chest tightened, but I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I forced a polite smile, the kind I'd used 1,000 times to smooth things over, nodded once, and said, "All right. Good luck." Then I turned and walked out, my footsteps echoing in the silence they left behind. The rest of the day blurred past me. I drove home in a daze, the steering wheel slick under my palms from the sweat I didn't realize was there. Our house, hers, really, with its marble floors and high ceilings, felt emptier than usual when I stepped inside. I dropped my keys on the counter and sank into the couch, staring at the ceiling. How could she do this? After 8 years of marriage, after all I'd poured into her family's company, she let Bianca fire me like I was some random hire off the street. My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me out of the spiral. It was a text from Marco, the accountant who'd been with me through every late-night budget crunch. "Heard what happened," it read. "I don't think they read your contract." I frowned, rereading the words. My contract. I hadn't thought about it since I signed it years ago, back when Raphael, Clarissa's dad, was still running things. What did Marco mean? I typed back a quick, "What's in it?" But he didn't reply right away. I leaned back, the gears in my head starting to turn. If there was something in there, something they'd missed, maybe this wasn't over yet. I got up and poured myself a glass of water, trying to shake the sting of Bianca's words. Lazy. I'd rebuilt their supply chain from scratch when it collapsed 3 years ago. I'd landed the Peterson account, the one that kept us afloat during that rough patch. And Clarissa, she knew all of it. She'd seen me stumble home exhausted, kissed me goodnight when I fell asleep at the kitchen table with my laptop still open. Yet today, she didn't even look at me. I took a sip, the cold water doing nothing to ease the heat building in my chest. Was this her idea? Did she want me gone too? Or was she just too weak to stand up to Bianca? I didn't know which hurt more. My phone buzzed again, "Marco. Check the merger clause from the subsidiary deal. You're still tied to it." The subsidiary deal. 5 years ago, when we acquired that little tech firm to boost Crimson and Veil's patents. I'd been neck-deep in it, negotiating terms while Raphael clapped me on the back and called me his right hand. A merger clause. What did that even mean now? I set the glass down and rubbed my temples, the first flicker of hope, or maybe something darker, stirring inside me. I spent the next hour digging through old files in my home office, the ones I'd kept from back when I trusted Clarissa to have my back. The contract was buried in a folder labeled C&V Merger 2020, yellowed at the edges but still legible. I skimmed the pages, my eyes catching on legalese I barely understood, until I hit page 17. There it was, in black and white. My name, listed as co-chairman of the subsidiary, with full authority over its assets. Assets that included Crimson and Veil's intellectual property, trademarks, patents, the whole backbone of the company. My heart thudded. They couldn't fire me from that. It wasn't their call. I sat back, staring at the paper, a slow smile tugging at my lips, not the polite one this time, but something real. They'd made a mistake, a big one, and they didn't even know it yet. I picked up my phone and texted Marco, found it. "What now?" His reply came fast, "Sit tight. Let them figure it out." I leaned back in my chair, the weight of the day shifting. They thought they'd cut me loose, but they just handed me the rope. All I had to do was wait. The morning after they fired me, I woke up to the sound of my phone ringing, cutting through the quiet of the house like a knife. I rolled over, the bed cold on Clarissa's side. She hadn't come home last night, probably crashing at Bianca's after their little victory. The screen lit up with Raphael Vale's name, her father, the man who'd built Crimson and Vale from nothing and trusted me with it when I married into the family. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the button. What did he want? To apologize? To gloat? I answered anyway, my voice rough from sleep. Hello. His voice boomed through the line, loud and furious, like a storm rolling in. Julian, why the hell did they fire you? Haven't they read the damn contract? I froze, the words sinking in slow and heavy. Raphael didn't know. He hadn't been in that boardroom, hadn't seen Clarissa's blank stare or Bianca's smirk. I let the question hang there, not sure how to answer or if I even should. I don't know, Raphael, I said finally, keeping my tone steady. You'd have to ask them. He cursed under his breath, something about those girls and ruining everything, but I barely heard it. My mind was already racing back to that merger clause Marco tipped me off about, the one buried in my contract. Raphael's anger meant something big was coming, and I had a feeling I was holding the key to it. I got out of bed and shuffled to the kitchen, the phone still warm in my hand from the call. The house felt too big, too silent without Clarissa's usual chatter or the clink of her coffee mug. I made myself a pot of coffee, the smell filling the air as I replayed Raphael's words. Haven't they read the damn contract? He sounded panicked, not just mad, like he knew something they didn't. I poured a cup and sat at the table, staring out the window at the gray sky. Yesterday, I'd been blindsided, kicked out like trash. But now I was starting to see the cracks in their plan. That subsidiary deal from 5 years ago wasn't just some footnote, it was a lifeline, and I was still tied to it. Co-chairman of the IP holding, with control over everything that made Crimson and Vale worth a damn. I took a sip, the bitterness matching the taste in my mouth from how they treated me. If Raphael was this worked up, it meant Clarissa and Bianca had no idea what they'd stepped into, and I wasn't about to tell them. My phone buzzed again, a text from Marco this time. Raphael just called me too. He's losing it. Said the girl screwed up big. I smirked, typing back. He called me first. What's he saying? Marco's reply came quick, kept asking about the merger terms. Think he's worried about the patents. The patents. Of course. Crimson and Vale wasn't just a name. It was a brand built on tech designs and trademarks, all locked up in that subsidiary I'd helped acquire. Without my signature, they couldn't license anything, couldn't move forward on new deals. I set the phone down and leaned back, the coffee warming my hands. Yesterday, I'd felt like a fool, walking out of that boardroom with my tail between my legs. But today I was starting to feel like the one in control. Raphael's call wasn't just a rant. It was a warning, one Clarissa and Bianca hadn't heard yet. I wondered how long it'd take them to figure it out, how long before they came crawling back. I spent the rest of the morning pacing the house, my mind spinning with what-ifs. What if they tried to fight it? What if they called their fancy lawyers? I didn't know much about legal stuff, but I knew enough to trust Marco and Raphael. If he was this mad, it meant the contract was ironclad. I stopped by the window again, watching a delivery truck rumble down the street. My whole life had been about keeping things steady, fixing problems at work, smoothing things over with Clarissa when she got stressed, even biting my tongue when Bianca snapped at me. But steady didn't matter anymore. They'd pushed me out, and now they were about to find out what that cost them. My phone rang again. Raphael, round 2. I picked up, ready this time. Julian, he said, quieter now, like he'd worn himself out. I'm sorry about this. I didn't know they'd pull something so stupid. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. It's done, I said. But what's in that contract, Raphael? What's got you so riled up? He paused, then let out a dry laugh. You're still co-chair of the subsidiary. They can't run the company without you. I didn't say anything, just let that sink in. He was right, and they didn't even know it yet. I was still reeling from Raphael's call when the reality of it all started to settle in, heavy and real, like a weight I could feel in my bones. Clarissa and Bianca had fired me without a second thought, but now they were about to find out what that really meant. It was late afternoon when Marco texted me again. They're in a meeting with the lawyers. Word is, they just read the contract. I could picture it, Clarissa sitting stiff at the head of the table, Bianca pacing like a caged animal, both of them staring at those pages like they'd turned to poison. I didn't have to be there to know what they'd found. 5 years ago, when we bought the tech subsidiary to beef up Crimson and Vale's portfolio, I'd been named co-chairman of it. It wasn't a big deal back then, just a title Raphael threw in to keep things smooth during the merger. But now it was everything. That subsidiary owned all the intellectual property rights, the patents, the trademarks, the designs that kept the company alive. Without my sign-off, they couldn't do a damn thing. I sat on the couch, the contract spread out on the coffee table in front of me, and let that sink in. They tried to cut me out, but they'd locked themselves in a cage instead. I leaned forward, running my finger over the words on page 17. Julian Rivera, appointed co-chairman, with full authority over subsidiary assets. It was right there, plain as day, signed and stamped. I remembered that day vaguely, Raphael laughing over beers after the deal closed, saying I'd earned it. I hadn't thought much of it then. I was just happy to be part of the team. But Clarissa and Bianca? They'd never bothered to dig that deep. They'd taken over the company from Raphael last month, all smug and sure of themselves, and figured they could toss me aside like yesterday's news. I wondered what their faces looked like now, pale, probably, with that pinched look Clarissa got when she was stressed, and Bianca's mouth twisted tight with anger. They brought in some hotshot lawyer from New York, Noelle, to help with the transition. I'd met her once, cold as ice, with a handshake that felt like a challenge. She'd be the one breaking the news, I bet, her voice flat as she told them they were screwed. I got up and walked to the kitchen, needing to move, to think. The house was still too quiet, Clarissa's absence like a ghost hanging around. I grabbed a beer from the fridge, popped it open, and took a long swig. What were they doing right now? Yelling at each other? Blaming Noelle? I could almost hear Bianca's voice, sharp and loud. How did we miss this? And Clarissa, quieter, trying to stay calm even though her hands would be shaking. They'd thought they were so smart, firing me in front of everyone like that, making it a show. But they didn't know the half of it. Without my approval, they couldn't renew licensing deals, couldn't push new products, couldn't even access the bank accounts tied to the subsidiary's assets. It was all frozen, and I was the only one with the key. I took another sip, the cold bottle sweating in my hand, and felt a strange mix of anger and satisfaction bubbling up. They'd humiliated me, but now they were the ones stuck. I went back to the couch and picked up my phone, scrolling through old messages from Clarissa. Just last week, she texted me about dinner plans, all casual and sweet. Home by 7. Let's order pizza. Now she couldn't even look at me. I tossed the phone aside and stared at the contract again, my mind racing. What would they do next? Try to talk me into signing off? Threaten me? I didn't know Noelle well, but she struck me as the type to twist words into knots, looking for a loophole. Good luck with that. Raphael had made sure this thing was airtight. I leaned back, closing my eyes, and let myself imagine their panic. The board would hear about this soon, and the clients too. People would start asking questions, and Clarissa and Bianca wouldn't have answers. I wasn't sure what I'd do yet. Part of me wanted to watch it all burn. Part of me just wanted them to admit they were wrong. But one thing was clear. They'd underestimated me, and that was their biggest mistake. The beer was half gone when my phone buzzed again. Marco, with an update. Noelle's freaking out. Says they need your signature or the whole company's dead in the water. I smirked, setting the bottle down. Dead in the water. That sounded about right. They'd built their castle on sand, and I was the tide coming in. I didn't reply to Marco yet. I needed to think this through, figure out my next move. But for now, I just sat there, the contract in my lap, and let the quiet of the house wrap around me. They'd find out soon enough what it meant across me. And when they did, I'd be ready. I decided to keep my mouth shut after that complete silence, no matter how much they tried to pull me back in. The day after Marco's text about Noelle freaking out, my inbox started lighting up. First came an email from Bianca, short and snippy, like she was doing me a favor. Julian, we need to discuss your exit terms. Call me. Exit terms? I almost laughed. She still thought she was in charge, like I was some loose end she could tie up with a quick chat. I didn't reply. Then Clarissa texted, her words careful, like she'd rehearsed them. Can we talk? This got out of hand. Out of hand? She'd sat there while her sister called me lazy and kicked me out of the company I'd helped build. I stared at the message for a minute, my thumb hovering over the screen, but I didn't type anything back. I tossed the phone on the couch and walked away. They didn't deserve my words, not yet. If they wanted to squirm, I'd let them. I had the upper hand now, and I wasn't about to give it up just because they were starting to sweat. I needed to clear my head, so I drove into town, the familiar streets blurring past as I replayed everything in my mind. The contract, Raphael's call, Marco's updates, it was all piling up, but I wasn't ready to act. Not until I knew exactly what was happening on their end. I pulled into a little coffee shop I used to hit with Geraldine, Raphael's old assistant, back when we'd grab lunch between meetings. She'd always liked me, said I was the only one who treated her like a person instead of a secretary. On a whim, I called her. Julian, she answered, her voice warm and surprised. I heard what those girls did. You okay? I smiled despite myself. I'm fine, Geraldine. Just figuring things out. What's the word over there? She laughed, low and knowing. Chaos, honey. Absolute chaos. She told me clients were calling nonstop, confused about delayed contracts. Suppliers were holding shipments, waiting for approvals that weren't coming. Investors were spooked, whispering about pulling out. They're running around like headless chickens, she said. And that Noelle? She's snipping at everyone, but she's got no answers. I ordered a coffee while we talked, the barista sliding it across the counter with a nod. I took a sip, letting Geraldine's words paint the picture. Chaos. Good. They brought this on themselves, thinking they could toss me aside and keep everything running smooth. I thanked her and hung up, settling into a corner booth with my drink. The place was quiet, just a few people tapping away on laptops, the hum of the espresso machine in the background. I leaned back, staring out the window at the gray day outside. Clarissa's text kept nagging at me. This got out of hand. Like it was an accident, like she hadn't chosen to sit there and let it happen. I'd loved her once, really loved her. Those early years when we'd stay up late dreaming about the future, her head on my shoulder. But now she was a stranger, and I wasn't sure I wanted her back in my life, even if she begged. I took another sip, the coffee bitter on my tongue. They could send all the emails and texts they wanted. I wasn't budging. My phone buzzed again, another email, this time from Bianca, longer and dripping with that fake politeness she used when she was mad. Julian, we're trying to resolve this amicably. Ignoring us isn't helping. Let's meet and sort it out. Amicably. Right. Like firing me in front of the whole board was amicable. I deleted it without a second thought. Geraldine's voice echoed in my head, clients panicking, suppliers freezing up, investors walking away. That was their mess now, not mine. I didn't owe them a lifeline. The contract gave me power, sure, but it was my silence that was really hitting them. Every hour I didn't respond. Every day I stayed quiet. Their world crumbled a little more. I finished my coffee and left the cup on the table, the warmth still lingering in my hands as I stepped outside. The air was cool, a light wind tugging at my jacket. I felt steady for the first time since that boardroom, like I was standing on solid ground while they flailed. Driving home, I thought about what Geraldine said, how Noelle had no answers, how the staff were whispering about jumping ship. It wasn't just about the patents or the trademarks anymore. It was about trust. They'd lost it, with the clients, with the suppliers, with everyone who'd kept Crimson and Veil afloat. And me? I didn't have to say a word to make that clear. I pulled into the driveway, the house looming dark and empty, and sat in the car for a minute, engine off. My phone stayed quiet now. No more messages, no more pleas. Maybe they were finally getting it. I wasn't their fix-it guy anymore. I wasn't their anything. I got out, locked the car, and went inside, the silence of the house matching the silence I'd chosen. Let them figure it out. Let them fall. I'd been quiet for days, letting Clarissa and Bianca stew in the mess they'd made, when I finally decided it was time to break my silence. But not to them. Not yet. The board had been emailing me non-stop, polite at first, then pushy, asking for clarity on the operational delays, rocking Crimson and Veil. I could have ignored them too, let the whole thing collapse under its own weight, but something in me wanted them to know exactly what was happening, and why. So I sat down at my desk, the contract spread out like a map, and typed up a reply. Not a rant, not a plea, just the facts, cold and clear, from me, Julian Rivera, co-chairman of the subsidiary they'd forgotten about. I laid it out. The merger clause from 5 years ago, my legal authority over the intellectual property, and how, without my signature, nothing could move. Not the trademarks, not the patents, not a single deal. I didn't ask for my job back or beg for forgiveness. I ended it with one line. I'm asking for accountability, not reinstatement. Then I hit send, copied every board member, and leaned back in my chair, the weight of it lifting just a little. They'd wanted me gone. Now they'd see what that cost. The house was still empty, Clarissa's absence a constant hum in the background, but I didn't mind it as much today. I got up and made myself a sandwich, ham and cheese, nothing fancy, while my phone stayed quiet. Too quiet, maybe. I figured the board was scrambling, passing my email around like a hot potato. Raphael had half of them in his pocket, Old-timers who'd watched me grind for years, while the newer ones probably sided with Clarissa and Bianca, dazzled by their big talk. My email would split them down the middle, and I was fine with that. Let them argue. Let them pick sides. I took a bite of the sandwich, the bread sticking to the roof of my mouth, and wondered who'd crack first. Raphael had already called me twice since that first rant, leaving voicemails I hadn't answered yet. "Julian, we need to fix this," he'd said in the last one, his voice rough. Fix it? He'd handed the company to his daughters, and they'd broken it. That wasn't my problem anymore. By evening, my phone started buzzing again, text from Marco, who'd somehow become my eyes and ears without me even asking. "Board's freaking out," he wrote. "Half want to bring you back, half think the girls can lawyer their way out." I smirked, typing back, "Let them try." Noelle might be sharp, but she couldn't rewrite a contract that had been signed and sealed years ago. I set the phone down and walked to the window, the sky turning orange as the sun dipped low. Rumors were starting to swirl, Marco said, whispers that the board might offer me full control of the IP arm, cut Clarissa and Bianca out completely. I didn't know if I wanted that. Part of me did. Sure, the part that still stung from Bianca's lazy jab and Clarissa's cold stare. But another part just wanted them to admit they'd screwed up, to look me in the eye and say it. I crossed my arms, watching a car roll by outside. Power was nice, but accountability? That was better. I went back to my desk, the sandwich half-eaten on a plate, and pulled up my email again. Replies were trickling in now, careful ones, like they were afraid to pick a side. One guy, an old friend of Raphael's named Tom, wrote, "Julian, this is a mess. We didn't know about the clause. What do you want out of this?" I didn't answer. What did I want? I wasn't sure yet. Yesterday, I'd been happy to watch them sink, but now, with the board dangling options, I had to think bigger. I leaned back, rubbing my eyes. The company was paralyzed, clients stalling deals, suppliers holding back, all because Clarissa and Bianca thought they could run it without me. My email hadn't just stirred the pot, it had tipped it over. I could hear their voices in my head, Bianca yelling, Clarissa trying to stay calm, and it almost made me smile. Almost. The night stretched on, and I didn't sleep much, just sat there with my thoughts and the hum of the fridge in the background. Marco texted again around midnight. Heard Raphael's pushing for a meeting. "Wants you in the room." I didn't reply. A meeting sounded like a trap. Get me in. Smooth talk me into signing something. Pretend it never happened. But the board splitting? That was real. If Raphael's half won out, I could come back on my terms, not theirs. I got up, grabbed a glass of water, and stood in the kitchen, the cold tile under my feet grounding me. They'd fired me like I was nothing, but now I was everything. The leverage was mine, and I wasn't giving it up cheap. Let them fight it out. Let them beg. I'd wait. I was in the middle of making coffee, the pot gurgling on the counter, when my phone rang, Clarissa's name flashing on the screen. I stared at it for a second, the sound cutting through the quiet morning like a warning. She hadn't called since the firing, just sent those careful texts I'd ignored. Part of me wanted to let it ring, keep the silence I'd been holding on to, but curiosity got the better of me. I picked up, keeping my voice flat. "Yeah." There was a pause, then her voice came through, softer than I expected, strained like she hadn't slept. "Julian, can we meet? Please." I didn't say anything right away, just let her words hang there. Meet? After everything? I could hear the desperation under her tone, the crack in that cool front she'd kept up in the boardroom. "Why?" I asked finally, leaning against the counter. She sighed, a shaky sound. "This whole thing, it's a misunderstanding. I want to fix it." A misunderstanding. I almost laughed, but I didn't. I just said, "Okay. Noon. That place on 5th. She agreed quick, like she was afraid I'd change my mind, and hung up. I set the phone down, the coffee smell filling the air, and wondered what she'd try to pull. I got to the restaurant early, a little spot we used to go to back when things were good, with tables, soft lighting, the kind of place that felt warm once. Now it just felt like a stage for whatever this was. I sat in a corner booth, sipping water, watching the door. Clarissa walked in right on time, her coat pulled tight around her, her face pale and tired. She saw me and forced a smile, the kind that didn't reach her eyes, then slid into the seat across from me. "Hey," she said, her voice light, like we were just catching up. I nodded, keeping my expression blank. "Hey." She fidgeted with her napkin, then leaned in a little. "Julian, I'm sorry about how this went down. It wasn't supposed to be like that." I raised an eyebrow, waiting. She kept going, her words tumbling out now. "Bianca pushed for it, and I didn't know how to stop her. We can work this out, right? You don't have to freeze everything. I listened, my hands still on the table, not smiling, not moving. She was trying to charm me, like she used to when she'd messed up, big eyes, soft voice, all of it. But it didn't hit the same anymore. The waiter came by, and she ordered a salad, her fingers twisting the menu before she handed it over. I got a burger, keeping it simple. When he left, she tried again. We need you, Julian. The company's a mess without those approvals. Can't we just put this behind us? I took a sip of water, letting her stew for a second. Then I heard Bianca's voice in my head, lazy, and saw Clarissa's blank stare from that day. I set the glass down, slow and deliberate. A mess, huh? Funny how that works. She blinked, caught off guard, but before she could answer, I kept going. You didn't say a word when she fired me. You just sat there. Now it's a misunderstanding. Her face flushed, and she looked down, picking at the napkin again. I didn't want it to happen like that, she mumbled. Bianca said we needed a clean break, and Noelle backed her up. I thought she stopped, like she knew it sounded weak. I leaned forward, my voice low. You thought what? That I'd just take it? She didn't answer right away, and then the food came, breaking the tension for a second. I took a bite of the burger, chewing slow, watching her poke at her salad like she'd lost her appetite. She glanced up, trying a new angle. Bianca's the one who pushed it. She convinced me it was best for the company. Noelle said it was legal. I swallowed, setting the burger down. Noelle's wrong. And Bianca doesn't get to pin this on anyone. You both signed off on it. Her eyes widened, like she hadn't expected me to push back so hard. Julian, please, she said, her voice cracking. We can fix this. Just sign off on the IP stuff, and we'll figure out a role for you. A role? Like I was some kid begging for a spot at the table. I wiped my hands on a napkin, looking her dead in the eye. You fired me like a stranger, Clarissa. Now deal with the consequences. She went still, her fork halfway to her mouth, then set it down. You're really going to let the company fall apart? She asked, almost whispering. I shrugged, taking another bite. Not my call anymore. You made it yours. She stared at me, like she was seeing me for the first time, and I could tell she didn't know what to say. The charm wasn't working, and the excuses were running dry. I finished my burger while she sat there, picking at her food, the silence between us thick and heavy. When the check came, I paid for mine and stood up. Good luck, I said, same as I'd said in the boardroom, and walked out. She didn't follow. I didn't look back. I woke up the next morning with Clarissa's words still rattling around in my head. You're really going to let the company fall apart? She'd said it like I was the one breaking everything, not her and Bianca with their stupid power play. I rolled out of bed, the sheets tangled from a night of tossing, and made my way to the kitchen. The house felt emptier every day, but I was getting used to it. I brewed some coffee, the hiss of the machine filling the silence, and decided it was time to stop waiting. They weren't going to fix this themselves. I had to push harder. So I sat down at my desk, pulled up the contract again, and drafted a notice. Not to Clarissa, not to Bianca, but to every partner Crimson and Veil worked with, clients, suppliers, the whole list. I kept it simple. All licensing agreements and contracts tied to the subsidiary were frozen until new terms were negotiated. No threats, no drama, just the truth. I was the co-chairman, and without my say-so, nothing moved. I hit send, copied the board, and leaned back, the coffee mug warm in my hands. Let's see how they handled that. The day went quiet after that. No calls or texts, just the hum of the fridge and the occasional car outside. I figured they'd need time to feel it, time for the emails to land, for the panic to set in. I wasn't wrong. By afternoon, my phone started lighting up, not from Clarissa or Bianca, but from clients. First was a guy named Paul, who ran a tech firm we'd licensed designs to. Julian, what's going on? He asked, his voice tight. We can't get approvals, and our production's stalled. I kept my tone calm, professional. I'm handling it, Paul. Sit tight, new terms are coming. He grumbled but hung up, and then another call came, then another. Suppliers asking about shipments, partners worried about deadlines. I gave them all the same line. I was on it. Things would clear up soon. They didn't need to know I hadn't decided what soon meant yet. I just wanted them calm, and Clarissa and Bianca scrambling. I was on my fourth call when Marco texted. Sales are tanking. Staff's jumping ship. I smirked, finishing up with a client before texting back. Good. Good didn't even cover it. This was what I'd waited for, them feeling the weight of what they'd done. I pictured Bianca storming around the office, yelling at anyone who'd listen, and Clarissa trying to keep it together while the numbers dropped. They'd thought they could run the show without me, but now desks were emptying out, deals were stalling, and I was the one getting the calls. One message stuck with me, though not from a client, but from Harper, a department head I'd always liked. She texted out of the blue, "Heard what's happening. If you start something new, I'm in." I stared at that for a minute, my thumb hovering over the screen. Start something new? I hadn't thought that far, but the idea stuck. I replied, "Appreciated. I'll keep you posted," and set the phone down, my mind spinning. By evening, the fallout was clear. Marco called, his voice buzzing with energy. "Julian, it's bad over there. 2 sales guys quit today, and a big client just pulled out. They're blaming Noelle now, she's out the door too." I leaned against the counter, the kitchen dim as the sun set outside. "Noelle's gone?" I asked, surprised. "Yeah," he said. "Bianca threw her under the bus, said the firing was her idea. She's packing up tonight." I shook my head, almost feeling sorry for her, almost. She'd been part of it, pushing that legal line to Clarissa and Bianca, but now she was just another casualty. I thanked Marco and hung up, grabbing a beer from the fridge. The cold glass felt good in my hand as I walked to the living room and sank into the couch. The company was collapsing, piece by piece, and I'd barely lifted a finger. That notice had done the work, short, sharp, and straight to the point. I took a swig, the bitterness matching the mood. Clarissa's face from lunch flashed in my mind, pale, pleading, trying to charm her way out. She hadn't called since, and neither had Bianca. Maybe they were too busy fighting each other now, or maybe they were finally getting it. I wasn't playing their game anymore. Harper's text kept nagging at me, though. Start something new. Could I? Take the IP, the clients reaching out, the people like her who'd follow me, and build something better? I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The company was falling apart, sure, but I didn't want it to just die. I wanted it to hurt them first, then rise again on my terms. I finished the beer and set the bottle down, the quiet settling in. They'd feel this tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that. And when they were done falling, I'd be ready to stand up. I was halfway through breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast, nothing special, when my phone rang again. Raphael's name popped up, and I knew this wasn't just another rant. I wiped my hands on a napkin and answered, keeping my voice steady. "Hey, Raphael." He didn't waste time. "Julian, we've got an emergency board meeting tomorrow. I need you there, not as an employee, as executive chairman of the IP holding. Can you do it?" I paused, the fork halfway to my mouth. Executive chairman. Not back to my old job, not begging for scraps, but a seat above Clarissa and Bianca, with real power. I set the fork down, my mind racing. "What's the deal?" I asked. He sighed, heavy and tired. "The company's bleeding out. Clients are gone, staff's leaving, and the board's done with the girls' mess. We're voting on new terms, Bianca out of client ops, Clarissa down to COO. You in?" I leaned back, the chair creaking under me. This was bigger than I'd expected. "Yeah," I said finally. "I'm in, but it's on my terms." He laughed, a short, rough sound. "Good. See you tomorrow." He hung up, and I sat there, the eggs going cold, feeling the shift happen right under me. The rest of the day, I kept busy, cleaned the kitchen, mowed the lawn, anything to keep my hands moving while my head worked it out. Raphael was handing me the reins, or at least a big chunk of them. Bianca out of client-facing stuff meant she'd be sidelined, probably stuck in some back office if she stayed at all. Clarissa as COO? She'd hate reporting to me, but she'd have no choice. I smirked, pushing the mower across the yard, the grass clippings sticking to my shoes. They'd fired me like I was nothing, and now I'd be the one signing off on their every move. It wasn't revenge, not yet, but it was close. I finished up and went inside, grabbing a glass of water and checking my phone. Marco had texted, "Board's buzzing. Raphael's pushing hard for you." I typed back, he called. "I'm in tomorrow." His reply came fast. "Hell yeah. They're done." I set the phone down and took a long drink, the cold water steadying me. Done? Maybe. But I wasn't just here to watch them fall. I wanted to build something out of it. The meeting was early, 9 a.m., and I got there on time, dressed sharp, suit, tie, the works. The boardroom felt different now, not like the place where they'd kicked me out. I walked in, head up, and saw the faces turn, some surprised, some relieved. Raphael sat at the head, his jaw tight, and nodded at me. Clarissa was there, pale and quiet, her hands folded in front of her. Bianca sat next to her, arms crossed, glaring like she could burn a hole through me. I took the seat Raphael pointed to, right near him, and waited. He started fast. "We're here because Crimson and Vale's dying," he said, his voice cutting through the room. Julian's notice froze everything, and we can't move without him. "I'm proposing he comes back, executive chairman of the IP arm. Bianca's off client ops, Clarissa's COO. Vote it now." The room went still, then hands went up, Raphael's crew first, then a few others. It passed, quick and clean. Bianca shoved her chair back and stormed out, the door slamming behind her. Clarissa didn't move, just stared at the table. I didn't say much during the meeting, just listened as Raphael laid out the damage, lost deals, empty desks, angry investors. When it was my turn, I kept it short. "I'll unfreeze the IP when we've got new terms that work. I'm not here to sink it, I'm here to fix it." Nods around the table, even from the ones who'd hesitated. Clarissa finally looked up, her eyes meeting mine for a second before dropping again. She knew it was over, her big takeover, her sister's grand plan, all of it. The meeting wrapped, and people filed out, Raphael clapping me on the shoulder as he left. "Good to have you back," he said. I nodded, but I wasn't back, not like before. This was new, and it was mine. Clarissa lingered, gathering her things slow, like she wanted to say something. I didn't wait. I walked out, the boardroom behind me, and headed to my car. The air outside was cool, the sun just climbing, and I felt steady, grounded. Back home, I sat at my desk, the contract still there like a trophy. The vote was done, but the work was just starting. I'd have to unfreeze the IP soon, get clients back on board, stop the bleeding. But first, I needed terms, rules that kept Clarissa and Bianca in check, that made sure no one could pull this again. I grabbed a notepad and started jotting ideas, my pen scratching across the page. Bianca was gone from the front lines, and Clarissa? She'd have to swallow reporting to me. I smirked, imagining her face in meetings, trying to keep that cool mask on. This wasn't the end, it was the start. And I was ready. I woke up the next morning with a clear head, the board's decision still fresh and real. The sun was just creeping through the blinds as I made coffee, the pot hissing like it was cheering me on. Executive chairman, those words kept rolling around in my mind, heavy but good. Clarissa and Bianca had tried to shove me out, but now I was back, higher up than ever, and they couldn't touch me. I took my mug to the desk, the contract still sitting there, and started planning. The company was a mess, clients gone, staff thin, sales flat. But I wasn't here to just patch it up. I wanted it stronger, better, and free of the entitled nonsense they'd brought in. I pulled out my laptop and started typing, laying out a new structure, merit-based hires, clear rules, no more family favors. Clarissa could stay as COO, but she'd answer to me now, and Bianca? Her apology email came in overnight. "Julian, I'm sorry, let's talk," but I didn't bother replying. She was out of the game, and I had work to do. First thing, I called Marco. He picked up quick, his voice bright. "Boss man, heard the news, congrats." I smiled, sipping my coffee. "Thanks. I'm making you CFO. You in?" He laughed, loud and easy. "Hell yes. When do I start?" I told him today, right now, get in, clean up the books, figure out what we could save. He was loyal, smart, and didn't mess around. I needed him. Next, I texted Harper, the department head who'd offered to jump ship with me, VP of Brand Strategy. "You still mean it?" Her reply came fast. "Absolutely. I'm there." I nodded to myself, adding her to the list. New talent, people I could trust. That's how we'd turn this around. I spent the morning sketching it out, cut the dead weight, bring in fresh faces, rebuild from the ground up. The old Crimson and Veil was gone. This was mine now, and I'd make it work. By noon, I was back at the office, not my old desk, but a new space they'd cleared out, big windows and a view. Clarissa was already there, sitting in a meeting room with some of the staff, her face tight but professional. I didn't go in, just watched through the glass for a second. She glanced up, saw me, and looked away fast, like she couldn't hold it. Good. Let her feel it. I settled into my chair and started emails, clients first, short and straight. IP's unlocking soon, new terms coming, stick with us. A few replied quick, relieved, saying they'd wait. Then suppliers, same deal, we're sorting it, shipments resume next week. The responses piled up, cautious but hopeful, and I could feel the tide turning. This wasn't just about holding power, it was about using it right. Afternoon hit, and I called the first meeting, me, Marco, Harper, and a few others I'd cherry-picked from the old crew. Clarissa had to be there too, part of her COO gig, and she walked in last, her heels clicking sharp on the floor. She sat across from me, hands folded, eyes on the table. I didn't waste time. We're restructuring, I said, passing out my notes. Merit hires, no favoritism. Marco's CFO, Harper's VP of brand. Clarissa, you'll handle ops, daily reports to me. She nodded once, quick and stiff, not arguing. Marco grinned, flipping through the pages, and Harper leaned in, already tossing out ideas. We went for hours, budgets, timelines, new branding plans, building something real while Clarissa sat quiet, taking notes. She tried to keep her dignity, her voice steady when she spoke, but I could see it wearing on her. Every decision ran through me now, and she couldn't dodge that. After, Marco hung back, clapping me on the shoulder. This is solid, Julian. We've got a shot. I nodded, stacking my papers. Yeah, just keep the numbers tight. He left, and I stayed, watching the office empty out. Clarissa lingered too, gathering her stuff slow, like she was working up to something. Finally, she came over, her voice low. This how it's gonna be? You calling every shot? I looked at her, calm and steady. You wanted me out. This is what you get instead. She swallowed, her jaw tight, then turned and walked away. I let her go, the door clicking shut behind her. She'd stay in line, she had to, or she'd lose what little she had left. I wrapped up late, the sky dark outside, and drove home. The radio off, just my thoughts for company. The company was shifting, new blood, new rules, and me at the top. I'd given Geraldine a call earlier, offered her a fat exit package to retire happy, and she'd cried, saying I was the best of them. Maybe I was. I pulled into the driveway, the house still quiet, but it didn't feel so hollow now. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about making something that lasted, something they couldn't ruin. I'd keep Clarissa on a leash, ignore Bianca's groveling, and build it my way. Tomorrow, I'd start again, and it'd be better than they ever dreamed. I woke up early, the house still dark, and felt a quiet kind of strength settling in me. Something steady, like the ground after a storm. Months had passed since the board meeting, since I'd taken the reins as executive chairman, and Crimson and Vale was finally breathing again. I made coffee, the familiar gurgle filling the kitchen, and thought about how far we'd come. Clients were back, loyal and steady, their trust rebuilt with every deal I'd signed off on. Investors had returned too, pumping money in once they saw the numbers climb. Clarissa stayed distant, doing her job as COO but never pushing me, never daring to step out of line. Bianca was long gone, her apology email still unanswered in my inbox. I didn't need her groveling. I'd moved past it. Today wasn't about them anymore. It was about locking in a legacy, making sure no one could ever be tossed aside like I was. I sat at my desk, the contract still there like an old friend, and started writing the final piece, new bylaws, a clause to protect the company and me for good. The office was buzzing when I got in, the air alive with people who actually wanted to be there. Marco had the books in shape, his grin wide as he waved me over. Numbers are up again, he said, sliding a report across my desk. Best quarter in years. I nodded, flipping through it, sales strong, costs down, everything clicking. Good work, I told him, and meant it. He'd stepped up, just like Harper had, her new branding rolling out smooth and sharp, pulling in clients we'd never touched before. I'd built a team, not a family dynasty, and it showed. Clarissa was in her office, door closed, probably going over the ops reports I'd asked for. She sent them every day now, on time, no excuses, professional, but cold. I didn't care. She'd lost her chance to be anything else to me. I turned back to my screen and kept typing, the bylaws taking shape, rules for fair hires, clear authority, a legacy clause that tied the IP to merit, not blood. No one would pull what they did again. Mid-morning, I called a quick meeting. Just me, Marco, Harper, and a couple board reps Raphael had sent. Clarissa had to sit in too, her chair squeaking as she settled across from me. I laid out the bylaws, keeping it simple. This protects us, I said, passing copies around. No more power grabs, no more firing people without cause. The IP stays with the company, but only under leadership that earns it. Marco nodded, skimming the pages. Smart. Locks it tight. Harper chimed in. Clients will like the stability. The board guys agreed. One scribbling notes, the other just saying, Raphael's on board. Clarissa stayed quiet, her pen tapping the table once, twice, then stopping. I didn't look at her long, just enough to see her jaw tighten, then relax. She knew this boxed her in, kept her from ever climbing back to where she'd been. Good. The vote was fast, unanimous, and I signed it right there, the pen heavy in my hand. It was done. After, I walked the floor, something I'd started doing to keep things real, talking to staff, hearing them out. They smiled now. Not the fake kind from before, but real ones, like they trusted me. One guy, a new hire, stopped me. "Thanks for this, Julian. Feels different here." I clapped his shoulder, said, "That's the point," and kept going. The place hummed, phones ringing, keyboards clicking, deals closing. I'd unfrozen the IP weeks after the board vote, renegotiated terms with clients myself, and watched it all snap back. Suppliers shipped on time, investors called me direct, and the company thrived not because of Clarissa's name or Bianca's bluster, but because I'd made it work. I stopped by the window, looking out at the street below, the sun high and bright. This was mine now, built on my terms, and it felt right. Evening came, and I stayed late, finishing up emails, thank yous to clients, updates to the board. Clarissa left without a word, her office dark when I passed by. I didn't mind the quiet. It gave me space to think. The bylaws were filed, the legacy clause locked in. No one could be discarded like I was, not without a fight. I leaned back in my chair, the desk lamp casting a soft glow, and let myself smile, not the polite one I'd used that day they fired me, but a real one, small and sure. Revenge hadn't been the goal, not in the end. I'd wanted them to feel it, sure, and they had. Bianca sidelined, Clarissa humbled. But this was better. I'd taken their mess and turned it into something stronger, something that'd last. I shut down my computer, grabbed my coat, and headed out, the office silent behind me. Driving home, the city lights blurred past, and I felt lighter than I had in months. The house was still empty, but it didn't weigh on me now. I'd rewritten the rules, set the terms, and kept that polite smile for when I needed it. Tomorrow, I'd keep building, and they'd never forget who held it together. I stood there at the airport, my suitcase still in hand, watching Cassandra's private jet lift off into the sky without me. My name's Julian Cole, and this was supposed to be our big anniversary weekend, a getaway she'd promised me for months. We'd been planning it since January, or at least I thought we were. I'd packed my best shirts, even bought a new camera lens to capture the moments I imagined we'd share. But there she was, laughing with her glossy posse of assistants and friends, all decked out in designer sunglasses and heels that clicked like they owned the world. "This is a girl's trip now," she'd said, tossing me that smirk of hers, the one that always made me feel like I was the punchline to a joke I didn't get. I could have yelled, could have made a scene right there in the terminal, but I didn't. I'm not the begging type. Her laughter echoed in my head as I turned on my heel and walked straight to the first-class desk. The lady behind the counter barely blinked when I asked for the next flight to Paris. I had the miles, the cash, and a sudden fire in my gut telling me I didn't need Cassandra's permission to live my life. Within an hour, I was buckled into a plush seat, sipping a coffee as the plane taxied down the runway. I wasn't chasing her. I was leaving her behind. 10 minutes after her jet took off, I knew she'd get the email. I'd scheduled it earlier that morning, right after she'd ditched me. It was from our shared legal advisor, a little automated surprise I'd set up with a few clicks. Subject line, preliminary separation agreement. I could picture her face, those perfectly arched brows shooting up, her lips parting in that silent gasp she does when she's caught off guard. She'd be 30,000 feet in the air, surrounded by her giggling crew, and suddenly pale as a ghost. Good. Let her squirm. By the time my plane touched down in Paris, my phone was already buzzing like a beehive. I didn't even check it, just let it vibrate in my pocket as I stepped into the warm, bustling chaos of Charles de Gaulle. 155 messages, I'd find out later. 155 little pleas, rants, and apologies she'd typed out while I was sipping wine over the Atlantic. But right then, I didn't care. I was in Paris, and for once, it wasn't about her. It was about me. I grabbed my bag, adjusted my jacket, and walked out into the city that was about to change everything. The air smelled like fresh bread and freedom, and I wasn't looking back. Cassandra could keep her jet, her entourage, her smirks. I had a ticket to something better, and I wasn't waiting for her to sign off on it. This was my runway now, and I was taking off. I settled into my first-class seat, the hum of the plane's engines vibrating through me as we climbed higher over the Atlantic. My name's Julian Cole, and for the first time in years, I wasn't flying to keep up with Cassandra's schedule or to play the part of her arm candy husband at some glitzy event. This was my flight, my choice, and it felt damn good. The flight attendant handed me a glass of champagne, and I watched the bubbles rise and pop, each one disappearing like the promises Cassandra had made over the years. We'd started out as partners, equals, I thought, building her luxury tech brand from late-night brainstorming sessions in our cramped apartment. Back then, it was our dream. But somewhere along the way, it became hers. I turned into the guy holding her purse at red carpet galas, smiling for the cameras while she dazzled the world. "Julian, you're so good at being there for me," she'd say, like it was a compliment. I'd nod, play along, let her shine. But now, staring out at the endless stretch of clouds, I saw it for what it was. I'd been erased, reduced to a prop in her perfect little production. The champagne tasted sharp, bitter even, but I drank it anyway. I reached into my carry-on and pulled out the leather-bound journal she'd given me last Christmas. It was one of those expensive gifts she loved, beautiful, thoughtful on the surface, but empty inside. She hadn't even bothered to write a note in it. Typical. I flipped it open, the blank pages staring back at me like a challenge. My pen hovered for a second, then I pressed it to the paper and wrote the first words that felt like they belonged to me. Julian's Paris. Not hers. It wasn't poetry, but it was mine. And that was enough. I leaned back, letting the words sink in. Paris wasn't just a destination now, it was a declaration. I wasn't going to trail after her anymore, wasn't going to wait for her to throw me a scrap of attention. This trip was about me figuring out who I was when I wasn't Cassandra Blake's +1. The plane rocked gently, and I started planning. I'd land in a few hours, check into a hotel, nothing like the over-the-top places she'd pick, and just walk. No itinerary, no press calls, no one telling me where to stand or what to say. I'd wander the streets, eat whatever smelled good, maybe dust off my camera and take some pictures for myself, not for her Instagram. The thought made me smile, a real one, not the practice grin I'd worn for years. I glanced at the journal again, tracing the words with my finger. Julian's Paris. It sounded like freedom. I didn't know what I'd find there, maybe a cafe with strong coffee, maybe a quiet corner to think, maybe even someone who'd see me. Not her shadow. The idea of not being alone for long flickered in my mind, but I pushed it aside. This wasn't about replacing her. It was about reclaiming me. The flight attendant came by again, offering a warm towel, and I took it, wiping my hands like I could scrub off the last decade of playing second fiddle. Outside, the sky was turning pink and gold, the sun dipping below the horizon. I didn't check my phone, didn't want to see her messages yet. Let her stew, let her wonder where I'd gone. For once, I wasn't the one waiting. I closed the journal, tucked it back into my bag, and finished the champagne. The plane leveled out, steady and sure, carrying me toward a city I'd always loved but never truly explored on my own terms. I didn't need her jet, her plans, her approval. I had a seat, a pen, and a clean slate. Paris was waiting, and I was ready to meet it, not as Cassandra's husband, but as Julian. Just Julian. The guy who'd finally stopped ghosting himself. I stepped off the plane at Charles de Gaulle, my legs stiff from the flight, but my mind buzzing with something I hadn't felt in years, possibility. My name's Julian Cole, and I was in Paris, not because Cassandra dragged me here for some photo op, but because I'd chosen it. The airport was a blur of voices, French, English, a dozen other languages mixing together, and I moved through it like a man waking up from a long sleep. I grabbed my bag from the carousel, slung it over my shoulder, and headed for the exit, ready to breathe in the city. But before I could get far, a voice called out, smooth and familiar. Julian Cole, as I live and breathe. I turned, and there he was, Marco Levant, leaning against a pillar with that easy grin of his. Marco was one of Cassandra's old investors, a sharp guy with a knack for turning a profit and a reputation for not taking her crap. He'd pulled out of her company a couple years back, something about creative differences, and now he was her biggest rival in the tech game. Marco, I said, shaking his hand. What are you doing here? He chuckled, adjusting the cuff of his tailored jacket. Same as you, I'd guessed getting out from under her thumb. I heard about the airport stunt. Classy move, by the way. I smirked, not sure how he knew already, but Marco always had his ear to the ground. Yeah, well, I wasn't about to cry over it. He nodded, like he'd expected nothing less. Good. You're not the only one she's tried to cut out, you know. She uninvited me from her little summit this weekend. Thought I'd crash it anyway. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a cream-colored envelope, handing it to me. You should come too. She's headlining, or was supposed to. Be a shame if she didn't see some familiar faces in the crowd. I took the invitation, flipping it over in my hands. It was for a tech summit in Paris, one of those exclusive events where CEOs and big shots patted each other on the back. Cassandra had been prepping for it for weeks, rehearsing her keynote speech in our living room, while I nodded along like a good husband. She doesn't know you're coming, does she? Marco asked, his eyes glinting with mischief. No, I said, feeling a grin tug at my lips. She will soon. He clapped me on the shoulder, laughing. That's the spirit. Come on, let's grab a drink. You look like you could use one. We found a bar just outside the terminal, all sleek glass and dim lighting, and ordered 2 whiskeys. The first sip burned, but it settled me, grounding me in this new reality where I wasn't just reacting to her moves. I was making my own. Marco leaned back in his chair, swirling his drink. So what's the plan, Julian? You're here. She's up there losing her mind. Where do you go from here? I thought about it, the invitation still in my hand. I don't know yet. I just wanted to get away, figure things out. But this? I tapped the envelope. This feels like a start. He nodded, like he got it. She's built a lot on your back, you know. Those early marketing ideas, the ones that got her brand off the ground? I remember whose brain they came from. I looked at him, surprised he'd bring it up. That was a long time ago. Doesn't mean it's not still true, he said, taking a sip. She's good at taking credit. You're good at letting her. Maybe it's time to change that. The words hit me harder than I expected. I'd spent years telling myself it didn't matter, that I was happy supporting her, being the guy behind the scenes. But sitting there with Marco, the whiskey warming my chest, I realized how much I'd let slip away. Paris wasn't just a getaway anymore. It was a chance to take something back. We finished our drinks, and Marco stood, tossing some euros on the table. See you at the summit, Julian. Don't let her off easy. He walked off, leaving me with the invitation and a head full of thoughts. I tucked it into my jacket, paid for my half, and stepped outside. The air was crisp, the city sprawling out in front of me. I didn't know what I'd do at that summit, but I knew one thing. Cassandra was about to find out I wasn't her ghost anymore. I hailed a cab, gave the driver the name of a hotel I'd found online. Nothing fancy, just mine, and watched the lights of Paris flicker by. This was my shot, and I wasn't backing down. I woke up to the sound of Paris breathing outside my window, a soft hum of life that felt worlds away from the polished chaos of Cassandra's universe. My name's Julian Cole, and I'd checked into Le Matin Bleu, a little boutique hotel tucked into the hills of Montmartre. It wasn't the kind of place she'd ever pick. No marble lobbies or concierges kissing her ring, but it was perfect for me. The room was small, with creaky wooden floors and a view of cobbled streets winding down into the city. I didn't need a penthouse to feel alive here. I pulled on a jacket, grabbed my camera, and headed out, letting the morning air hit me like a reset button. The streets were narrow, lined with old stone buildings and flower boxes spilling over with color. I walked without a plan, something I hadn't done in years. With Cassandra, every trip was a mission, schedules, meetings, photo ops. But today, I was just a guy with a camera, wandering through a city that didn't care who I was married to. I stopped at a cafe, the kind with wobbly tables and waiters who didn't rush you. The coffee was strong, the croissant flaky and warm, and I sat there watching people go by, artists with sketch pads, old men with newspapers, kids chasing pigeons. No one asked me about her latest product launch or told me to smile for a picture. It was just me in the moment, and I felt my shoulders loosen for the first time in forever. After breakfast, I headed toward the art district, the camera slung around my neck like an old friend I'd forgotten I had. Photography used to be my thing, back before Cassandra turned it into a punchline. It's a cute hobby, Julian, she'd say, like I was a kid playing with toys. I'd stopped bringing it up, stopped carrying the camera unless she needed a shot for her feed. But here, in Paris, I lifted it to my eye and started snapping street corners, cracked walls, a woman selling flowers from a cart. The world looked different through the lens, sharper, like I could hold onto it instead of letting it slip through my fingers. A couple of locals noticed, an older guy with a beret and a woman with a scarf tied just so. "You're a photographer?" the guy asked, his English rough but friendly. "Just for fun," I said, lowering the camera. "Beautiful city you've got." He grinned, proud, and they started asking about the gear, the shots I like to take. Not once did they mention Cassandra or her brand. It was like I'd stepped out of her shadow and into my own skin. That night, I followed a flyer I'd seen pinned to a cafe wall, some rooftop exhibition in the neighborhood. The place was strung with lights, the air thick with chatter and cigarette smoke. I wandered through, sipping a glass of cheap wine, looking at sculptures and paintings that felt raw, real. Then I met Genevieve Thorne. She was standing by her installation, a mess of wires and screens flickering with images that broke apart and came back together. She had dark hair pulled into a loose bun, paint smudged on her cheek, and eyes that locked onto you like she could see right through. "What do you think?" she asked, nodding at her work. "It's like it's falling apart and starting over at the same time," I said, not sure if that made sense. She smiled, a slow, knowing thing. "That's exactly it. Erasure and rebirth. You get it." We talked for a while, her voice soft but steady. She told me about the piece, how it was about shedding old versions of yourself to find what's underneath. "Sometimes you have to disappear to finally be seen," she said, and it hit me like a punch. I've been disappearing for years, fading into Cassandra's spotlight, but maybe I didn't have to anymore. I told her about my camera, how I'd picked it up again that day, and she nodded like she understood more than I was saying. "You should come back tomorrow," she said. "There's a workshop. Bring your photos." I left the rooftop with her words rattling around in my head, the city lights blurring below me. Montmartre felt like a liberation, every step pulling me further from the guy I'd been. I didn't need Cassandra's approval or her private jets. I had a camera, a coffee-stained map, and a stranger's invitation to keep going. Paris was mine now, and I wasn't letting it go. I got back to Le Matin Bleu after that rooftop exhibition, my head still spinning from Genevieve's words and the way Paris had started to feel like mine. My name's Julian Cole, and I'd been running on adrenaline all day, walking the streets, snapping photos, talking to people who didn't know me as Cassandra's husband. The hotel room was quiet, just the soft creak of the floorboards and the distant hum of the city outside. I tossed my jacket on the chair, kicked off my shoes, and sank onto the bed, staring at the ceiling. My phone sat on the nightstand, dark and silent. I hadn't turned it on since the airport, hadn't wanted to deal with whatever Cassandra was throwing at me. But something pulled at me now, curiosity, maybe, or just the need to see how far she'd unraveled. I picked it up, pressed the power button, and waited as it buzzed to life. The screen lit up, and there it was, 155 messages. A wall of notifications, all from her. I scrolled through, not opening them yet, just watching the previews stack up like a train wreck I couldn't look away from. The first few were smug, classic Cassandra. "Still at the airport?" one read. "You're being dramatic," said another. I could hear her voice in my head, that sharp little laugh she'd let out when she thought she'd won. She probably sent those right after her jet took off, sipping champagne with her crew, thinking I'd just sit there and wait for her to come back. By message 20, the tone shifted. "Where are you?" She'd written, no smirk in that one. Then, a few later, "Julian, answer me." I kept scrolling, the words blurring together. By 45, she was pissed. "What the hell did you do?" That must have been when the email hit, our legal advisor's little gift about the separation. I smiled to myself, imagining her flipping through her inbox at 30,000 feet, her perfect nails tapping the screen harder with every word she read. The messages kept coming, a flood of her losing control. "You can't do this to me." She wrote at 96, like I was the one who ditched her at an airport. Then the apology started. "Julian, I need to talk to you. Please," came at 124. "I'm sorry," she said at 142, and I almost laughed out loud. Cassandra didn't say sorry, not unless she was backed into a corner. The last one, 155, hit different. "We need to fix this." No demands, no snark, just a plea. I stared at it for a long minute, the screen glowing in the dim room. My thumb hovered over the reply button, but I didn't press it. What was there to say? She'd left me standing there, laughed about it, and now she was scrambling because I'd finally stopped playing her game. I turned the phone off, the screen going black again, and set it back on the nightstand. Let her wonder. Let her sit with it. I wasn't her lapdog anymore, racing to fix things the second she snapped her fingers. I got up, walked to the window, and pushed it open, letting the cool night air roll in. Paris stretched out below me, all twinkling lights and quiet streets, and I felt something settle in my chest, peace, maybe, or power. She could send 1,000 messages, and it wouldn't change a thing. I was here, living my life, while she was up there, spiraling in her private jet bubble. I grabbed my camera from the table, flipping through the shots I'd taken that day, the flower cart, the cracked wall, the old guy in the beret. They weren't perfect, but they were mine, and that felt better than any staged photo I'd ever taken for her. I thought about Genevieve's workshop tomorrow, how she talked about erasure and rebirth. Maybe that's what this was, me wiping the slate clean, letting Cassandra's avalanche of texts bury the guy I used to be. I didn't owe her an answer, didn't owe her my time. She'd figure out soon enough that I wasn't coming back to beg. I climbed into bed, the sheets cool against my skin, and closed my eyes. The phone stayed off, the messages unread. For the first time in years, I fell asleep without her voice in my head, just the sound of Paris whispering me into tomorrow. I woke up to sunlight spilling through the curtains of my room at Le Matin Bleu, the kind of soft glow that made Paris feel like a painting. My name's Julian Cole, and for once, I wasn't jolted awake by Cassandra's voice barking orders or her phone blaring with notifications. It was just me, the quiet, and a day I got to shape. I stretched, feeling the ache in my legs from yesterday's wandering, and smiled. Today was Genevieve's workshop, and I was ready to see where it took me. I grabbed a quick shower, threw on a sweater and jeans, and headed out with my camera and a few of the photos I'd printed at a shop down the street. Saint-Germain was a trek from Montmartre, but I didn't mind the walk. Every corner of this city had something to show me. The streets were alive with people, the air thick with the smell of bread and coffee. I stopped at a stall for a pain au chocolate, eating it as I went, crumbs falling onto my jacket. By the time I reached the workshop, a little studio tucked above a bookstore, I felt like I'd already lived a full morning. Genevieve was there, setting up screens and cables, her hands moving fast but sure. "You made it," she said, glancing up with that half-smile of hers. "Brought your soul to shred?" I laughed, holding up my camera. "Something like that." She waved me in, and I joined a handful of others, artists, mostly, with paint-stained fingers and quiet energy. The workshop was about digital self-portraits, she explained, but not the polished kind you post online. "We're deconstructing ourselves," she said, her voice steady, "taking who we were and breaking it down to find what's left." I nodded, not totally sure what that meant, but ready to try. She handed me a tablet hooked up to a projector, showed me how to upload a photo, and start pulling it apart pixel by pixel, layer by layer. I scrolled through my shots, then stopped on one Cassandra had posted months ago. It was us at some gala, her in a glittering dress, me half cropped out of the frame, smiling like an afterthought. She'd captioned it something about power couples, but I'd always hated how it looked, like I was barely there. I uploaded it, and the image flashed onto the screen, bigger than life. Genevieve leaned over. "That's a good one to start with. What do you want to do with it?" I didn't even think. Get rid of her. She grinned, showing me how to drag a tool across the screen, erasing Cassandra bit by bit. Her dress dissolved, her face blurred into nothing, until all that was left was me, half a figure, awkward and incomplete. But I wasn't done. I kept going, breaking down the edges, the background, the fake smile I'd worn that night. The pixels scattered like dust, and I rebuilt it, pulling my silhouette into the center, filling it out with lines and shadows from the Paris shots I'd taken. The gala faded, replaced by cobblestones and streetlights, until it was just me, standing whole. The room was quiet, everyone lost in their own work, but I felt Genevieve watching. "That's you," she said, nodding at the screen. "Not whoever you were pretending to be." I looked at it, my shape, my city, no trace of her. "Yeah," I said, my voice low. "I think it is." We spent hours there, tweaking and tearing apart, the air buzzing with this strange mix of focus and release. I didn't just stop at that one. I pulled up other photos, old ones from our life together, and shredded them too. A beach trip where she'd made me hold her bag, a dinner where I'd been stuck taking pictures of her food, gone, all of them, turned into something new. By the end, I had a series of images, each one a piece of me I'd forgotten. Genevieve walked over as I saved the last one. "You just published your first piece of emotional honesty," she said, her eyes steady on mine. "Feels good, doesn't it?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. It did feel good, better than good. It was like I'd clawed something back, something she'd buried under years of her spotlight. I left the studio as the sun dipped low, the tablet under my arm, and those images burned into my head. Paris glowed around me, all golden and alive, and I walked back to the hotel with a lightness I hadn't known I could feel. Cassandra's world didn't own me anymore. I was undoing it, piece by piece, and building something real in its place. I stepped out of the cab into the cool Paris evening, the lights of the summit venue glowing ahead like a beacon. My name's Julian Cole, and tonight wasn't about hiding anymore. It was about showing up. Marco had invited me to this dinner, the one Cassandra was supposed to host, and I'd said yes without a second thought. The invitation was still in my pocket, creased from being handled all day, but it felt like a ticket to something bigger than just a meal. I adjusted my jacket, not the flashy kind she'd have picked for me, just a simple one I liked, and walked in. The place was all glass and gold, packed with tech execs and investors in suits that cost more than my old car. I scanned the room, half expecting to see her sweeping in with that queen bee smile, but she wasn't there. The table settings had her name on them, though, Cassandra Blake, keynote speaker. Guess she hadn't canceled yet. I found Marco near the bar, sipping a drink and chatting up some guy in a bow tie. He spotted me and waved me over. "You clean up nice, Julian," he said, handing me a glass of something dark and strong. "Ready to stir the pot?" I took a sip, letting it burn down my throat. "She's not here, is she?" He shook his head, smirking. "Not yet. Word is she's been off the grid since that email hit. Her team's scrambling." Before I could ask more, someone grabbed my arm. Lily Monroe, Cassandra's executive assistant. She was all nerves, her blonde hair slipping out of its neat bun. "Julian, thank God," she whispered, pulling me aside. "She's been spiraling since that legal thing dropped. She hasn't told anyone why she's not here tonight." I raised an eyebrow, keeping my voice steady. "That's her mess to explain, Lily. Not mine." She blinked, like she hadn't expected that. "You're not worried?" "No," I said, smiling just enough to throw her off. "Let her tell her story. I'm telling mine." Lily stared at me, then nodded slowly, backing off as the crowd started moving toward the tables. I found my seat. Marco had made sure I wasn't stuck in the back, and settled in, the buzz of the room washing over me. The keynote was about to start, some stand-in guy fumbling through notes, when the MC stepped up instead. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice booming. "Before we begin, let's acknowledge someone in the room. Julian Cole, the man behind the original marketing concept Cassandra Blake built her empire on, without credit." The air went still. Heads turned, eyes landing on me. I froze for a second, the glass halfway to my lips, then set it down as the gasps rippled through the crowd. Marco leaned over, grinning. "Told you I'd stir the pot." Silence hung heavy, then someone clapped, slow at first, then faster, until the room broke into applause. I stood, nodding, not sure what else to do. The MC kept going, talking about innovation and unsung heroes, but I barely heard it. My heart was pounding, not from nerves, but from something else, relief, maybe, or vindication. For years, I'd let her take the credit, told myself it didn't matter as long as the company thrived. But it did matter, and now everyone knew it. The dinner rolled on, plates clinking, voices rising, but I felt like I was floating above it. People came up after, shaking my hand, asking questions about those early days. "You're the real deal," one guy said, a tech blogger I recognized. "She never mentioned you." "She didn't have to," I said, keeping it light. "I was there anyway." Marco caught up with me later as the crowd thinned. "You handled that like a pro. She's going to hate this." "Good," I said, meaning it. "Let her." We stepped outside, the night air sharp against my skin. I didn't need her here to feel the weight of this moment. The applause still echoed in my head, not just for what I'd done, but for what I was doing now, standing up, stepping out. Lily's words stuck with me, though. Spiraling. Part of me wondered what Cassandra was doing right then, pacing some hotel room, yelling at her phone, trying to spin this. But I didn't linger on it. This dinner, this night, it didn't need her. I'd walked in alone and walked out taller. Paris had given me that, and I wasn't giving it back. I walked along the Seine the next evening, the water reflecting the city lights like a mirror cracked with gold. My name's Julian Cole, and I was still riding the high from that summit dinner, those gasps, that applause, the way people looked at me like I was someone worth seeing. It was a rush, but it didn't erase the quiet itch in my chest. Cassandra had texted again that morning, one line cutting through the noise of the last few days. "Let's meet." No press. Just us. I'd stared at it over coffee, the steam curling up from my cup, and against my better judgment, I typed back. "Fine. Café Lumière, 7 p.m. Now here I was, heading to meet her, not sure what I wanted out of it, but knowing it was time to face her. The cafe was small, tucked off a side street, with round tables spilling onto the pavement. I got there early, ordered a glass of red wine, and sat outside, watching the river flow. She showed up 10 minutes late, typical, her heels clicking like a warning shot. She wore sunglasses even though the sun was long gone, her face unreadable behind them. She slid into the chair across from me, setting her bag down with that careful grace she'd perfected. "You embarrassed me," she said. "No hello. No soft start." Her voice was tight, like she'd been holding it in too long. I took a sip of wine, letting her words hang there for a second. "No," I said, setting the glass down. "You exposed yourself. I just stopped covering for you." She pulled off the sunglasses, her eyes sharp and tired at the same time. "That email, Julian. The summit. What are you trying to do? Ruin me?" I leaned back, keeping my voice even. "I'm not trying to do anything to you. I'm done playing your game, that's all. You left me at the airport, laughed about it. Did you think I'd just take it?" She flinched, just a flicker, but I caught it. "It was a mistake," she said, softer now. "I got caught up with the girls, the trip. It wasn't supposed to be like that." "But it was," I said. "And it's been like that for years. Me waiting, you deciding. I'm not your prop anymore, Cassandra." She stared at me, her fingers tapping the table, that nervous habit she hated admitting she had. "So what? You're just walking away? After everything we built?" "You built it," I said, and it felt good to say it out loud. "I helped, sure. Gave you ideas. Held you up. But you took the credit, the control, and left me in the background. I'm not asking for a medal. I'm just done pretending it's enough." Her jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. Maybe she couldn't. "Let's talk settlements, then," she said, switching gears like she always did when she lost ground. "We can figure this out, keep it clean." I reached into my pocket, pulled out a card, Catherine's, my lawyer, and slid it across the table. "Everything goes through her now. We're done here." She looked at the card, then back at me, her mouth opening like she wanted to fight, but I was already standing. "Julian, wait," she started, but I didn't. I left her sitting there, the wine untouched, the card glaring up at her. The power shift was complete, and it hit me as I walked away, slow at first, then all at once. I didn't owe her that conversation, didn't owe her my time or my explanations. She'd had years of me bending, adjusting, making it work. Not anymore. I crossed the street, the Seine stretching out beside me, and felt the weight lift. This wasn't her choice anymore, it was mine, and I'd made it. I kept walking, the city folding around me like a friend. Paris had given me a voice, a spine, and I wasn't handing them back. She could sit there all night, plotting her next move, but it wouldn't change a thing. I was free, not just from her, but from the version of me I'd let her shape. The river flowed on, steady and sure, and I matched its pace, my steps lighter than they'd been in years. I woke up the next morning with the sun sneaking through the blinds of my room at Le Matin Bleu, a quiet energy buzzing in my chest. My name's Julian Cole, and after last night, leaving Cassandra at that cafe table, her voice fading behind me, I felt like I'd finally cut the last thread tying me to her world. I didn't check my phone, didn't care if she texted again. Today wasn't about her. It was about me, and I had an idea brewing. I grabbed a coffee from the hotel's little kitchen, the bitter taste waking me up as I sat by the window, watching Montmartre stretch awake. The streets below were already moving, vendors setting up, people shuffling to work, and I thought about those photos I'd taken, the ones I'd reworked with Genevieve. They weren't just pictures anymore. They were pieces of me, raw and real. What if I showed them? Not to Cassandra, not to prove a point, but for myself. I pulled out my notebook, scribbling down thoughts. Gallery, exhibit, Paris. By the time I finished my coffee, I had a plan. I called Genevieve, catching her just as she was heading out. "Hey, it's Julian," I said, pacing the room. "You know anything about renting gallery space?" She laughed, that easy sound that made everything feel possible. "You're serious?" "Yeah, I know a spot near Le Marais. Small, but it's got character." "What are you thinking?" "An exhibit," I said, the words solidifying as I spoke. "Those portraits I did at the workshop, plus the street shots from this week. I want to put them up." She didn't hesitate. "I'm in. Meet me there in an hour." I hung up, grabbed my camera and the printed photos, and headed out. Le Marais was a maze of narrow streets and old buildings, alive with galleries and cafes. The space Genevieve found was perfect. White walls, worn wooden floors, a big window letting in light. The owner, a gruff guy named Pierre, agreed to a short rental, muttering about crazy artists, but handing me the keys. Genevieve showed up with a toolbox and a grin, and we got to work. We hung the photos, my silhouette against Paris streets, the fragmented gala shot, the flower cart lady mid-laugh. I called it uncropped, a name that felt right, like I was finally stepping into the frame. We worked all day, adjusting frames, tweaking the layout until it looked like something real. By the next afternoon, we opened it up, nothing fancy, just a sign out front and word of mouth. People trickled in, locals mostly, then some tourists, their voices bouncing off the walls as they looked at my work. I stood back, watching them linger, point talk. A woman in a red coat bought the flower cart shot, saying it reminded her of her grandmother. A guy with a beard asked about the tech behind the digital pieces. It wasn't a mob, but it was enough. 2 days later, every print was sold. I couldn't stop smiling. Marco dropped by that second night, his suit sharp as ever. "Congratulations," he said, handing me a beer from a nearby bar. "You're a hit. By the way, she's been trying to buy back your shares in the company." I told her too late. I laughed, clinking my bottle against his. "She can keep scrambling. I'm good here." He nodded, looking around. "This is you, Julian. Not her shadow. You should see her face when she hears about this." I didn't need to. I could picture it, those perfect brows furrowing, her lips pressing tight. But it didn't matter anymore. The gallery was mine, the photos were mine, and the people who'd bought them saw me, not her. Genevieve joined us, her paint-splattered jeans a contrast to Marco's polish. "You did it," she said, nudging me. "Told you there was something honest in there." "Couldn't have without you," I said, meaning it. She shrugged, but her eyes said she got it. We stood there, the three of us. As the last visitors left, the space quiet again. I looked at those empty walls, the sold tags still pinned up, and felt full not just of pride, but of something I'd lost along the way. This was my passport to the real me, stamped and signed in Paris. I didn't need Cassandra's approval or her empire. I had this, and it was enough. I woke up on my last day in Paris with the kind of quiet that sneaks in after a storm, soft, steady, and mine. My name's Julian Cole, and I'd spent the week rewriting myself, step by step, photo by photo, until I wasn't just Cassandra's husband anymore. The room at Le Matin Bleu felt smaller now, like I'd outgrown it. My bags half packed by the window. I didn't know where I'd go next, back home, maybe, or somewhere new, but I knew I wasn't the same guy who'd landed here. I grabbed my phone off the nightstand, the screen lighting up with one new message. It was from her, sent just after midnight. "Do you still love me?" I stared at it, the words sharp against the soft morning light. Cassandra, always cutting to the core when she was desperate. I could see her typing it, probably alone in some hotel suite, her nails clicking on the screen, waiting for me to cave like I always had. My thumb hovered over the reply button, a dozen old habits tugging at me. Say yes, smooth it over, give her something to hold on to. But I didn't. I pressed delete, the message vanishing like it had never been there, and set the phone down. No response, no punctuation, just peace. I didn't owe her an answer anymore. I got up, pulled on a sweater, and headed out, the city calling me one last time. The streets of Montmartre were waking up, bakers hauling trays, kids laughing on their way to school, and I walked with no rush, letting it all sink in. Paris had given me more than I'd expected. A camera rediscovered, a gallery sold out, a spine I'd forgotten I had. I ended up at a bookstore cafe near the Seine, a little place with mismatched chairs and shelves packed tight. I ordered a coffee, grabbed a new journal from the rack, plain, no leather, nothing fancy, and sat by the window, the river glinting outside. The pen felt good in my hand, steady, like it belonged there. I opened to the first page and wrote, Julian Cole, artist. No longer Cassandra's +1. No longer stranded. Just flying. The words came easy, no hesitation, no second guessing. It wasn't a grand story, just a start, but it was mine. I sipped the coffee, the bitterness grounding me, and watched the water flow. People moved past, tourists with maps, locals with bags of bread. And I didn't feel invisible anymore. I thought about the week. Marco's grin at the summit, Genevieve's quiet push at the workshop, the gallery walls bare from sold prints. They'd seen me, not her shadow, and that was enough to carry forward. My phone buzzed once, twice, but I didn't check it. Let her send whatever she wanted, apologies, threats, more questions. It didn't matter. I'd said everything I needed to by walking away, by building something here. The cafe filled up, voices blending into a hum, and I kept writing, ideas for photos, places I might go, things I wanted to see through my lens. The pages filled fast, each one a step away from the guy who'd stood at that airport, suitcase in hand, watching her jet take off. I didn't hate her, I realized, finishing my coffee. I didn't even miss her. She was just a chapter ending, and this journal, this city, this me, was the first page of something else. I paid the bill, tucked the journal under my arm, and stepped outside. The air was crisp, the Seine steady beside me. I walked along it, my boots tapping the pavement, and felt the weight of her final message lift completely. No, I didn't still love her, not the way she meant, not the way that kept me tethered. I loved this instead, the freedom, the quiet, the man I was becoming. I stopped at a bridge, leaned on the railing, and watched a boat drift by. Paris stretched out around me, its lights flickering on as the day faded. I'd fly out tomorrow, but I wasn't leaving empty-handed. I had a new story, a first chapter written in my own hand, and that was more than enough to take with me. I stood on that bridge over the Seine, the cold metal of the railing pressing into my palms, and watched the boat disappear around a bend. My name's Julian Cole, and this was my last night in Paris, a city that had taken me apart and put me back together in ways I hadn't seen coming. The air was sharp now, the kind that bites at your nose, and the lights along the river flickered like they were winking at me. I wasn't ready to leave, not really, but I knew I couldn't stay forever. Tomorrow I'd fly out, back to a life I'd have to figure out from scratch, but tonight was still mine. I pulled my jacket tighter and started walking again. No plan. Just the urge to soak up every last second of this place. The streets were quieter now, the crowds thinning as the city settled into itself. I passed a guy playing an accordion, the notes slow and heavy, and tossed a few coins into his hat. He nodded, not breaking the tune, and I kept going, the music following me like a shadow. I thought about that journal in my bag, the one I'd started at the cafe, the words I'd written, Julian Cole, artist. It still felt strange, calling myself that, but it fit better than Cassandra's husband ever had. I wondered what she was doing right now, probably back home by now, pacing our old living room, yelling at Lily or her lawyers. That last text of hers, "Do you still love me?" kept popping into my head, but not because I wanted to answer it. It was more like a ghost, a whisper from a life I'd left behind. I didn't feel guilt, didn't feel torn, just done. I turned down a street I hadn't explored yet, narrower than the others, with old lanterns casting pools of light on the cobblestones. A little bar caught my eye, nothing fancy, just a wooden sign swinging over the door that said, Le Repos. Rest. Sounded good. I pushed inside, the warmth hitting me like a hug. The place was small, half full, with low ceilings and tables scratched up from years of use. I ordered a whiskey at the counter, the bartender pouring it without a word, and took it to a corner by the window. The glass was heavy in my hand, the amber liquid catching the light, and I sipped it slow, letting it burn its way down. A guy at the next table was sketching on a napkin, his pencil scratching quick lines, and I watched him for a minute, feeling the itch to pull out my camera. I didn't, though, just sat there, soaking it in. Then the door creaked open, and Genevieve walked in. She spotted me right away, her dark hair loose tonight, a scarf dangling from her neck. "Fancy meeting you here," she said, sliding into the chair across from me without asking. "Thought you'd be packing." I smiled, setting the glass down. "Thought I'd say goodbye to Paris first. What about you?" She shrugged, ordering a wine from the passing bartender. "I live here, but I like this place. Good for thinking." We sat there, quiet at first, the hum of the bar filling the space. She looked at me, her eyes steady like they'd been at the workshop. "You're different now," she said, not a question. "Yeah," I said, nodding. "I feel it too." She sipped her wine, then leaned forward. "That exhibit, uncropped, it wasn't just photos, was it? It was you figuring out who you are." I thought about that, the way those images had pulled me out of Cassandra's frame. "Guess so. Took a while to see it." She smiled, small but real. "Most people don't. They stay cropped." We talked for hours about art, Paris, the way things break and mend. She told me about her next project, something with sound and light, and I told her about the journal, the idea of keeping this going wherever I landed next. The whiskey ran low, the bar emptied out, but we didn't move. It wasn't flirty, wasn't anything more than two people who got each other, but it felt good, solid, like an anchor in all this newness. When the bartender called last rounds, we stepped outside, the cold snapping me awake. "You'll be back," she said, pulling her scarf tight. "Paris doesn't let go that easy." "Maybe," I said, grinning. "Or maybe I'll take it with me." She laughed, waved, and disappeared down the street. I walked back to the hotel alone, the city quiet now, my breath fogging in the air. I packed my bags, tucked the journal in last, and lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow I'd leave, but tonight, I was still here, still Julian, still flying.